Hello everyone, this is Scott and welcome back to the channel. And today I'll be going over Octavia in her basics and what you could do with her as a full-on free-to-play. I'll assume that you're an absolutely basic player that has not yet done any vault runs or nightmare missions, etc. for any special mods, so the current build will only include very basic mods, some stuff you can get from Cetus, etc. Furthermore, I got this little bit of an art frame looks for you guys as well, and also a Mandachord setup for, again, an absolute free-to-play player that really doesn't want to spend platinum. But of course, since this is going to be a video about the basics, first I'm going to go over, again, the basic of our abilities, how to obtain it in the first place, etc. Now let's get right into it. So in order to obtain Octavia, you are going to need to do Octavia's Anthem quest. And this one is only unlocked after you complete the second Dream main storyline quest, so be sure to progress through the main story first, before you actually can start getting Octavia's Anthem. After that, in order to get her Neurooptics, which is actually the most annoying part of this one, you're gonna have to go first to the market and get yourself a derelict survival key blueprint. And I already own it, can I show you? But it's 1,500 credits to get it, and then you can build it indefinitely. It will cost 6,500 credits, 5 nav coordinates, 2,500 nanospores, 750 salvage, and 80 circuits. And that is gonna be, you're gonna have to get one of these per run, because you're gonna have to do the derelict survival, which you can find all the way up to the right here. And the reward is the so-called C rotation reward, which comes by at 20, 40, 60, etc. Minutes. If you're confident you can hit 40 minutes in the survival, you can go up to 40. But there's actually no problem at all just going for 20 minutes, then getting yourself a new key and then just redoing the run. The drop chance is 22.56%, so expected you're gonna have to do 5 of these runs. And that's where the biggest pain for Octavia comes from. That's 1 hour to yeah, it's actually over an hour. It's almost 2 hours actually to actually get this on average for each player. But to get it nearly guaranteed, it is actually 18 of these runs. So be sure to get a few of your buddies, if you have any buddies, to go and play together and get Octavia together as well. The other two parts are a bit easier. They're both obtained on Lua, and the one that you're gonna have to go after is Plato. So Plato, the quest for Exterminate, they have these caches, and for people that you have been playing for a while, you probably already know these are normal loot containers, but they're a bit larger in size. They have white light instead of red for closed or green for opened, and they can be placed pretty much random in any room. And these make a little bit of sounds, so it's pretty easy to locate. And the system's blueprint have a 22.56% chance of dropping on the A rotation caches. A rotation means that you only need to get the first cache in the mission in order to get it. So basically A is the first cache, B would always be the second cache, and the C is always the third cache. It doesn't matter in what order you get them, or like whether you get the one that's at the start of the mission, at the middle, or in the end, doesn't matter. As long as you get one, you can have that 22.56% chance on getting Octavia's systems. Furthermore, there is this Lua music puzzle room in the Lua missions that drops the chassis blueprint, which is a 100% chance on getting, so you just have to find the room. The room can also be found on Plato, so when you start farming for the systems blueprint, you might as well look around and maybe you can find a Lua music puzzle room. However, since there are already many videos on how to cover how to get that one, I will not actually go into a mission to show you guys that. So instead, I will actually go over the abilities of Octavia, and I'll be doing that into the simulacrum. Let's first go into the ability stats before modding. I will actually not go over the descriptions of the abilities themselves. I will actually cover them in the single Mandachord once I'm done with the mods. And also just go over the stats real quick. Mallets first has, of course, 25 energy drain, just like any other first ability. 2.5 times damage multiplier, 10-meter radius, 20-second duration. Resonator, 50 energy drain, 20-second duration, 6-meter minimum charm radius, and 15 meters maximum charm radius, and 125 damage per charm. This is blast damage, just like the mallet, both have blast damage. Please keep that in mind. The metronome has a 75 energy drain, 12-meter radius, 20-second duration, 25% armor increase, and has a 15% buff duration on the cloak. The fifth has speed buff, which is 30%. The opera multi-shot buff, again 30%. 40 melee damage buff, 30%. The amp uh, also has 100 energy drain, just like any other normal 4. 14-meter radius, 30-second duration, which is again bit longer here than the metronome and mallet. Those two both have the default duration of 20. But and the Resonator also default of 20, but the amp actually has a duration of 30 seconds, which is 50% more. Damage multiplier of the amp is 0.25 to 2 times. So the build I have actually ready here can be done with the default polarities, which are these two dashes down here, and one potato. And you throw on any dash polarity aura, because I actually have an aura format on my Octavia. And generally you want to have energy siphon or corrosive projection. And other than that, you can actually throw on these mods and they'll fit in perfectly with the 74 energy capacity. You got Augur Message for ability duration. Got Intensify for ability strength. Got Vitality for health. Augur Reach for ability range. Stretch also for ability range. Then some ability efficiency with Streamline. Energy with flow, and continuity for ability duration. If you want, you can also actually throw on a Axelis if you assume you actually have the Axelis slot unlocked. And I would actually go with Vigilante Pursuit, which gives you plus 30 enemy radar. Furthermore, it does give you some extra chance to enhance critical hits from primary weapons, which can be handy if you have a crit-based primary. The Augur abilities are actually really handy because if you spend energy, which will do a lot with Octavia, you get some energy spent conversion to shields. Even though the shield value is pretty low, 225, you really don't want to amplify the shields on an Octavia. You really only are interested in the vitality buff. Or if you actually want to go full on Umbral, you would go with the Umbral Vitality, of course, but both only buff health, and you don't really want to have to buff on shields or anything. But they will help you keep up your shields if they happen to go down on accident. Because the biggest weakness for Octavia is splash damage. So damage that is actually not meant for you, but hits you anyways. So think about bomb birds, but also very often gas and toxin damage. That's the big reason why you want to go into vitality. You want to keep up your health because things that ignore your armor and shields, such as toxin and gas, is actually going to hit you more often than any other damage type. And with that, of course, if you don't have enough health, they're just going to drain you to 0. And with this build, you got a 154% duration, 130% efficiency, 175% range, and 130% strength. People often say you don't want to build for strength, but strength in this case actually does give you a little bit more strength on your amp, and it gives you a higher damage multiplier on your mallet. So you can see the new stats going down on the energy drain, of course. Radius 17.5 meters, almost doubled. We got a 30.8 second duration, which is more than enough for a lot of stuff. If you want to further increase the duration, you can consider getting yourself Constitution, but you're probably going to have to format at least once or get rid of your Vigilante Pursuit. That's actually one mod that I can really advise getting. It's a plus mod, which you actually can get from Nightmare missions, or just pay platinum in a trade chat. Shouldn't be too expensive. So that said, we do have to go into the appearance tab for the Mandachord. But first, I'm actually just going to go over the frame that I have here. This is something you can get with for free entirely. I'm only using the two base colors, the white and the cyan here, but you can go with any of the colors in along with the white. And it is pretty decent looking. I went with the Octavia Cadenza helmet, which you could get from the Nightwave offerings. And I'm sure there's going to be another helmet or two coming along at some point. So if you want to like get yourself a different helmet than the chicken helmet, which I always call it, because of all the stuff hanging up in the top, you can definitely get one. I always go with the Noble animation set because I do like the hand on the hips compared to like this. She looks a bit better this way in my opinion. Of course, everything can be up to you. So the attachments, I went with some Saturn 6 shoulder plates, which again got from Nightwave, and got something from Barricade here with the EOS Prime chest plate. Went with a pretty simple ephemera, nothing really important there. And the Sayandala is actually a Solstice Sayandala. The only thing you want to watch out for with Sayandanas is sometimes the hitbox is a bit wonky. In this case, it works out because it just gets pushed back. But you're definitely going to notice it with some. Probably here, you can see it actually clipping through. And on the other side, it actually gets pushed back by the rear hip part. And with some of these, it gets worse and worse. Here you can see this one actually getting pushed through the middle, while this one actually gets pushed all the way around to the front even. And yeah, it doesn't really make for the prettiest of looks from a lot of these. And I don't really have the good, like some of them actually start clipping in and out, which is even weirder. So you really have to like watch out for that if you're gonna pick a Sayonara on this one. If you do want to art frame a little bit, this is probably something I would go for. Anyways, we're gonna go on to the Mandachord. And this is actually pretty sure this is no this was the one. It is the one that I have on the free to play. So of course, if you yourself get your Octavia, this is the song that you're gonna get. And it's really not great if you wanna actually play with Octavia and get that stealth easily. So this system all works as Fallout. The mallet ability is fueled by these top 3 gray ones. And the only thing you have to remember is you want to have at least a point in this little grid of 4x3, and then one more in here, one more in here, one more in here, and then so forth. Doesn't matter if you just want to go like very simple like this, or we're gonna go fancy. This is just 4 bass drums hits. And it's pretty much as simple as you can go. And that's all you really need for your mallet. But I of course did make one of my own. Resonator is fueled by the 5x4 blue grid. Now I'm just going to go for one of these for the separator. And again, you just want to have one per line. These abilities both work on the beat and the damage on the beat. But if you put in more, so for example this, the damage gets divided by these 4 spots. Same here, it gets divided by these 4 spots. So if you have 4, it's entirely full. Damage is much more smoothened out. So I do have to say the mallet, of course, the damage increases the more damage it takes. So let's say you get damage increase on this moment. If you had only one here and one here, the damage increase will be noticed here and noticed here. But if you already have 2 points here, the damage increase will be noticed earlier already. And the damage output will be increased earlier as well. So if you're really going to go try hard, you want to go fill up the entire line. But it doesn't really sound too good. And if you want to go simple and really going to go musical, you just have to remember one in each line works. So I'm going to load back to default. And we're going to go down to the bottom here. Metronome, you really want to fill up the entire line. So whenever you perform an action, such as crouching for the stealth, you get this percentual value that counts toward getting the buff. And if you get 100% on that value, you actually then get the buff. So you have to keep on performing actions on the beat until you get the buff. But if the beat is only 1 a second, it can actually be harder than if you have full. Because there's a little bit of an auto correction system, like I'm not going to go into details, but basically if you have all 4, you can literally just spam crouch and get the buff. I can really go into the math and etc, but that will only really come up with the second video, which is going to be towards island hunting with Octavia, which I'm still preparing. But that's that. There's also one weird thing about this melody of this instrument. So I'm actually just going to clear everything for a second, and I'm just going to go here. And you can actually hear that the bass drum goes earlier than the sound on the melody. The melody is a bit delayed, and in musical terms it means you have a slow attack value. And attack has nothing to do with actual damage and attacking. It's, again, a musical term. We'll not go too much into it. If you want to have different instruments, you can go in here, and there are all of these instruments which have each have their own drums, bass, and melody. However, there are 50 platinum apiece. You can already see I spent 250 platinum just on the music instruments here, which is very, very painful. If you want to have all instruments, you actually have to spend 400 platinum. And that's why I actually made this song for the free-to-play. And I actually made up for the slow attack by literally moving the entire melody 1 unit to the left. You can see here, where you would normally expect you have 4 here, and then 4 here, and then 4 here. I compensated for the slowness of the melody by putting them all 1 back. Furthermore, because of the nature of this instrument, I would actually advise go with 4 after each other before chopping melodies. And this is basically what I came up. And this is, again, done with only the default instruments. If you don't really want to listen to this, you can actually turn the volume sliders down. And then you actually do get all the benefits of Octavia, but without sound, for the people that actually don't like hearing the sounds. But I'm actually just going to go with the full sound here and save and exit here. So that's actually the looks that I got here. One thing I do have to point out, if you have multiple look systems here, the Mandachord song is actually bound to your slot right here. So if you accidentally click on B right here, and you haven't set up a song for the B one, you're actually going to get your default song again, and that's something to just keep in mind in the back of your head. So that said, I do have some weapons here, which really is not important. Also, I got your Naru active, but again, not important at all for Octavia. So first, I'm gonna have to clear up some misconceptions with the 1. So, of course, the 1 is her damaging ability, quote unquote, but if we go over here, and we got some level 30 corrupted heavy gunners here, I'm going to throw down the 1. It does absolutely nothing by default. And this is the biggest misconception for the metronome. The metronome is purely a damage redirecting ability. And that means that people are going to have to shoot it in order for it to gain damage. You can't really damage it. This is actually area damage from my flamethrower. You cannot damage or charge it in any way, and it actually has to be done by your enemies. Your second ability, by default, also does no damage. Again, it says it deals damage per charm, but that only counts when you also have your 1 active. And it counts to how many enemies are within radius, and those get 125 blast damage from it by default, but actually you don't really notice it at all. Like, when it gets close, it should actually do some damage, but again, this is one of the big misconceptions why you don't use the 2. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just does no damage, and again, with boss enemies, you don't get any damage whatsoever from these abilities. So that's it. After this one runs out, we're gonna go over to the tree. Well, actually, we can go over to the tree right now. We activate it, we see top right metronome, 45%. And that is the armor buff. When I start crouching, you see the nocturne buff. I got 18%, 4%. Now it's 0 because I'm not really working on the beat. But if you really go fast, you can see it go up and then it disappears and you get the nocturne buff with a timer. You can see again it being pointed out there. And now I'm invisible. And all of my abilities are requestable, so when there's still countdown, I can request it. But also with the stealth, even when it's still going on, I can refresh it by simply spamming crouch again. So for the multi-shot buff, I actually do have one weapon that actually works pretty well with it, which is the Ignis. Here I got the multi-shot buff, and of course it's a beam weapon, so I get the damage increase. But it's one thing to keep in mind: beam weapons, it only counts as one shot if you're holding down the trigger. So if you want to actually get the buff, you're going to actually have to spam the button. And currently, one hit generally gives you 8% of the buff. With Nocturne it can be slightly different, but with here you can see 8% buff per use. Melee gives you 12% per use. And sometimes you miss it a tiny bit. And there we go, we got a farther buff. And now we can actually hit for quite a bit extra damage. And jumping gives you generally 18% unless you miss the jump. So those are the things you want to keep in mind. With how long it actually take. Generally with spamming crouch, you're only about a second to activate the Nocturne buff. But especially with the firing of your weapon, it takes really long to actually get your buff. So now we're going on to our 4. Again, stationary. And you can actually see it going up and down a little bit now. And you can see the damage buff is currently 237% on the top right. If we activate our 1, and then you might want to just make a little bit of sound, because sometimes this, mainly in the Sacred Requiem, like it fails to update the ability. You can see now it's 32%, but as soon as I shoot a tiny bit, it recognizes the mallet again and goes back up to the 237 cap. And your free is also pretty good at maintaining this, but generally you only need your 1 next to it. And in normal missions, of course, you have enemies shooting that 1, and that's actually just the things that generate that sound in order for the 4 to operate at maximum strength. And that's actually the main part of it. Of course, with the 4 active, you can actually see the true range of our mallet, which is really large. That said, the mallet itself, you can see the little effects on the sides. Ooh, I shouldn't fall off. And about until here is where the effect is. So these guys are still, like in terms of height, can still be damaged by this ability. But if you're a bit lower or like much higher, you actually don't get damaged because you're outside of the cone, basically. There's this, well, cylinder actually. So you can see there's the light effects up to around there. But so if you basically if you're on top of here, the damage wouldn't affect the enemies at all. And that's something to keep in mind as well. You are limited by verticality on your 1. So that's it. I'm gonna turn on the AI for these enemies and actually show you how the damage output actually does work. So I'm gonna kill these, and we're gonna say corrupted bombards. We're gonna take 10 of those, and we're gonna take 10 of these corrupted heavy gunner. We're gonna unpause the AI. Gonna keep on my invincibility. Real quickly, grab my invisibility buff as well, and we're just gonna shoot here real quick a little bit for them to come over. Hello. And we're gonna drop our 1. And here you can see the actual damage output of the 1 by default. And one thing you're gonna notice that these guys are not dying. That's because our 1 does require a line of sight towards the enemies it kills. So you generally want to put it up in places where it can maintain the like direct line of sight on enemies. What I'm not going to do is actually going to try to drop it somewhere around there, up higher, and see what happens. You can see here, again with the verticality, it doesn't get damaged, although it might be possible that it is simply because, oh, now I drop it down here. trying to put it up high is actually harder than it seems sometimes, because it throws it off to the left a little bit. And of course, if it's not in the line of sight for enemies either, they won't shoot it. Okay, now they actually are shooting it. So it's a bit easier to say whether they're hitting it. Okay, so that one actually did get killed by it, and that's actually one of my bigger surprises. Or, I don't know what killed it, to be honest. But I'm just gonna quickly simulate these 19 more enemies. And see what they were gonna be doing. Okay, they hit it. And try to get these guys over here. Gonna reactivate it. See if they try to shoot it. Okay, they're trying to shoot it. They're not really hitting it, but this should pretty much show like why you should throw it down on the same elevation as enemies you're after. Furthermore, one secret stat about the amp that I just threw down, it also actually doubles the damage on your mallet. So the synergy between those two are really, really good. But the reason, okay, I guess for now we should go on to our resonator. Why to use it and why not to use it. The only reason I would use it is to pacify very high level enemies when you got a defense objective that you don't want destroyed, and you do have plenty of enemy allies that are capable of damaging them and taking them out. That would be the only reason to use the 2. But at that point, you can only use the 2 and not the 1, because it only pacifies when it's like this. And here you can see, okay, now it does do some damage. And of course the enemies run after this guy. So they're actually also, it's a decent distraction when you're doing something like a spy mission. And because these guys are pacified, they don't think of the resonator as an enemy, and they will not sound the alarm. However, when you throw down this one, and we're gonna go activate it, now they do see it as an enemy, and they will start shooting it. And that's something to really keep in mind. Of course, it does have a strong aggro pull, so it's gonna still distract enemies and kill them. But the problem is, they will shoot the resonator, the ball. In order for the metronome to charge, it needs to be hit directly by bullets. So if it's active like this, the only way to charge damage from the metronome is by splash damage. So things like heavy gunners cannot actually affect the damage output as much as the bombards. Of course, you do have accuracy. But for that, I'm just going to take the bombards away. We're going to get some more heavy gunners. Simulate that. We're going to activate our 2. And after that, we're going to activate the 1. And they're going to shoot it a little bit, I assume. And okay, you can see they do get some damage output, but it's quite low actually. And the time to kill is much longer than as when you had your 1 and 4 instead of your 1 and 2. Of course, 1 and 2 does give you a whole lot more energy efficiency, and it does come after you. So this is actually probably the second reason when you would use it. On exterminates, you can activate both your 1 and 2 and have it follow you. And if you actually end up missing some straggler enemies, these guys will still actually go after enemies even when they are following you. And that's actually where the most death sentence comes from. Sometimes they run off and they get up to a certain distance away from you, and they will teleport to you. But the problem is they will always teleport behind you, and generally you are facing enemies. So when they teleport behind you, the first things the enemy will do, you're invisible, so people will not notice you. But they will start actually shooting you, and you will actually get blast damage to death, because the bombards are just going to shoot their rockets at the resonator and metronome combo. But you're standing right in between, and you're just going to eat those rockets. And that's really something to watch out for with your 2. So that's why I'm, again, advising against using your 2. And that's it. Let's go into why power strength on Octavia. The damage input and damage output on enemies is slightly out of balance. So on higher level enemies, the difference between their damage and their health in terms of percentage is much bigger than on low level enemies. Low level enemies, let's say they have 10 times the health compared to the damage. On higher level enemies, they might have 50 times the health compared to their damage, because damage scales slower than health. If you have a bit of power strength for your metronome, it will actually be able to scale better against higher level enemies. Because of course it is an infinite scaling damage tool, that the higher the damage output from the enemies is, the higher damage output of the metronome is as well. And that's it. I'm gonna have a few more tips on the usage of it, and I actually should be here. I'm gonna go and simulator 20 corrupted heavy goons again. And I'm just gonna activate my stealth, because why the hell not? This is one other thing I want to point out. Even though it does make a lot of noise, it is considered completely silent for any enemies. So what I do advise, if you have a group, throw it right in the smack middle. They will all start shooting at the exact same time, which means that the genuine moment at which they die is also all the same. And this is how to maximize the damage stored by a metronome, because they all got the chance to shoot at it before they died. And here you can see actually the time to kill. This is only using corrupted heavy gunners, which have a relatively low damage output, and they die within a few seconds. But let's say we're just gonna summon a bunch of much higher leveled ones. Gonna keep up the stealth buff, and we're gonna change the level all the way to max. That was cancel, not confirm. And here are full 110 corrupted heavy gunners, and this is gonna take a bit longer for them to actually start killing themselves. You can see how much longer it takes, because these guys have a much higher health compared to their damage output. Of course, what we can do is throw down a 4, heavily increase the range, double the damage, but still it's not quite enough. They will start falling now, but some of them, again, haven't yet fallen because they were still walking up from there. So there's a lot of health disparity, etc. And it's actually going to run out before we even kill the majority. So we're going to throw it down again. And now we'll be able to like take them out. But again, it takes really, really long. And that is where like the biggest misconception again comes from, is that the metronome by default doesn't do damage. It only like redirects it. So what we're going to do is going to kill our enemies. We're going to go back to corrupted. We're going to get 10 corrupted bombards and 10 corrupted heavy gunners. Again, max level. And oh, they were already a bit active, so that was a little bit bad. Since I have invincibility, I can actually get away with this. I want to try to get the corrupted heavy gunners to come over before anything else. Okay, here we go. And we're gonna drop the 1. Oh, that's something again to also watch out for. Enemies and allies can block your ability casting, because of course you throw the little ball, and if you miss the throw, that's going to be a problem. Here you can see that the damage output is already quite a bit better, but you also notice it's still not quite enough at level 100 with these kind of enemies. Like, okay, yes, they drop, but it can take quite a while. It can take 10 plus seconds for these guys to die. And that's why there's actually is a need for power strength. But again, the chance that you face these kind of enemies, pretty low. And again, these are also the most armored targets in the game, other than the Exilus variants of them. So don't really worry about this too much. Right now I'm just going to go into the final details here, to be honest. So again, it is blast damage. This, so it's more effective against machinery, but it's not very effective against corpus. So generally what I would advise, again, 130% power strength is good enough against even things like level 100s. It takes a bit of a while, and you definitely don't want to stay in the survival for level 100, but for something like the level 100 sortie, 130% power strength is more than enough. And yeah, other than that, you just want to build towards duration and range. Because if you do have more duration, like this thing is still charged. it's about to run out, so I can't quite show it, but it's still charged with all the damage the enemies dealt before it like went away. So with longer duration, you can have a like when it lasts longer. Of course, you're gonna have a higher maximum damage, but with power strength, it starts up killing way earlier. So you kind of want to find a balance between the two. And as long as you can keep up your abilities, you don't really need more duration. And at that point, you can actually start building, again, power strength. One easiest way to just amp that strength is a little bit. Again, you have 9 extra slots if you don't have the excellence on there. One of the most effective way to get it is doing the power drift, which has a 15% ability strength, which puts it up to 145, but you will lose the enemy radar, which is a bit of a downside. But at this point, you can, again, you don't notice any difference in the efficiency and duration. When we start simulating these guys again, go over here, fire up in the air a little bit for bombards to come over, hopefully. Bombards, are you guys coming over? Yes, you are. Okay, we're going to drop the 1 and 4. And here we go. They are starting to lose health quite fast. Not sure what that guy teleported to. But here they're already at 50% health, about in half the duration. Those guys are actually starting to get outside the visual range of this ability. But about 145%, again, this works perfectly fine for the level 100 if you do happen to get against corrupted, because normal heavy gunners at level 110 you're not gonna have any issues whatsoever. In that case, you can simply keep on that radar. And yeah, that's mostly it for the free-to-play starter Octavia. And she's stupidly strong, as you can see, her abilities. You can deal with level 110 enemies by just deploying a bunch of abilities. But again, stay away from the resonator. That's the biggest thing that I want to like hit home with you guys. And now, before I'm ending, I'm gonna do a few small detail things that I want to point out, but those are not really important to get playing with Octavia. You're gonna notice it eventually with her anyways. So of course, the 1 is charged by enemy damage. If the enemies get just mass killed by one of your allies, it will not have much chance to trigger. So if you have a Sarin or a Mesa that is really doing a good job at killing enemies, you might want to just ignore placing down your 1 and place down your 3 and 4 only instead. Another thing I want to point out is the ability upkeep. You want to activate your 1 and 3 every 30 seconds and your 4 every 45 seconds. That is going to tax your energy quite a bit. That's why I actually did end up putting a flow on the build, because if you start out with a lot of energy, and for example you only have to activate your 3 every 30 seconds, which is actually not quite right. If you want to go solo here, you actually only need to activate your again, I activated the metronome 30 seconds ago. I'm gonna now just make sure I get my buff at the last second. Okay, I have now 20 seconds of the ability, and I'm still invisible for 20 seconds, so I can actually use my energy siphon to get 20 seconds worth of free energy before reactivating my tree. A little bit of a energy saving trick there. So about when it hits 3 seconds, you want to activate it, and then you want to spam, because then about when it is 1 second left, you can get the buff. And that's where, like, that's one of the easiest way to do it. And furthermore, to upgrading, yeah, first thing I would actually go is get the Constitution upgrade in here. Probably, you don't really need Aqua Reach, so I'll probably replace Aqua Reach with it. So I'm just gonna throw over that. Then you do have to format at least once here, so, or you can actually throw it on into Streamline here. So it costs 9. That's one option, to go a little bit less in range, more in the duration. It's not that you will notice it too much. You will only go to 36 seconds. You can 6 seconds the total duration. Can be nice, but not really needed. And here you can notice the energy upkeep. This is the range when you actually did get it. It's the only real mod for free-to-plays that I would advise getting over anything else. But yeah, that's really mostly it with Octavia. And yeah, that said, I very much hope you guys enjoyed watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.